This has been a week of surprises. I'm Joseph. This is Input English. Today I have a story. The purpose of telling you stories is to provide comprehensible input. Simply put, if you can follow these stories, if you can understand what is happening in the story, then you will absorb the language. This is where the magic happens in comprehensible input. In order to be useful to you, content needs to be understandable. You need to be able to follow it. If you don't have any idea what the story's about, then that's not good content for your purpose. A story needs to be interesting. You need to want to know about this story. You need to want to listen to the story. And then ideally, the story would be compelling. The story would be so interesting to you that you get absorbed into it and you don't notice how much time has passed because you're really enjoying yourself with this compelling story. If you look around, there is a lot of content available in English that you can get access to. But most of that content for the language learner will not cover these three characteristics. This is why I create these stories. I want to create stories that are helpful to you, that are interesting to you, and which will foster your acquisition of the English language. So let's get started with this story. Before we start, if you have not subscribed to the channel, please hit that free subscribe button. It makes a big difference. I started out with the statement, this has been a week full of surprises. That was a thought in the mind of Kathy. Kathy was thinking back on her week and how she did not anticipate what was going to happen. She didn't expect certain things to occur. Two in particular. It all started last Monday. Kathy had a court appearance at 9 o'clock and a meeting scheduled at 11, so she had a little bit of time between her court appearance and the meeting that she could get some work done. So she went to her office, that is the law office. She was working in her office at the law firm. She was working on her laptop. The door to her office was open because the office is not super busy and interruptions of her work are not common. But she was about to be interrupted. This interruption was not a negative one. It was a very positive one. As she was working, she sensed that someone had stopped at her door, but had said nothing. She looked up and saw Jed. Jed Fowler is a senior partner who recently retired from the law firm. He's not in the office very much anymore, but he does come by from time to time. Jed is a very respected senior partner, and so it is common for some of the partners to ask him to opine about complex legal issues. That was what was at work on this day. Jed had come by to speak with one of the other partners. As he came past Kathy's door, he stopped to just say hello. Kathy jumped out of her chair and embraced him at the doorway. She asked if he would come in and sit down, but he declined. He pointed out that he was supposed to meet with one of the other partners. Kathy asked Jed how his wife was doing, and in turn, Jed asked Kathy how she and her family were doing. Now this you could consider polite small talk, but in this case it was not, because Kathy was very interested in Jed's wife, her well-being, and what she is doing in her retirement phase. Conversely, Jed was very interested in how Kathy and her family were doing. So they caught up with what was happening in their lives. Just about the time Jed was leaving to go to his meeting, he said, "Oh, by the way, would you like a piano?" Now, Kathy was not prepared for that question. It was out of the blue. The expression out of the blue means out of the blue sky, out of thin air, completely unexpected. So out of the blue, Jed offered a piano to Kathy. Kathy collected her thoughts quickly and asked what kind of piano and how much. Jed answered her question. It is a 10-year-old Yamaha upright, and the price for you would be the cost of moving it. He added, and of course it would need to be tuned after it has been moved. Kathy was really surprised. Basically, he was offering a free piano. She thought quickly. She was thinking about where it would fit in the house. There was a place in the living room that it would fit rather nicely. They could move things around a little bit, and that piano would look nice in the living room. Knowing Jed, she expects that the piano has been well cared for and is probably beautiful. It didn't take Kathy long to decide. In a moment, she said, "That sounds great. How do we organize this?" Jed said, "Just get a piano mover to pick it up, and it's yours." Kathy thanked him, gave him another hug, and sent him on his way to his meeting. She has a new project. She needs to find a piano mover and get that piano moved into her house. She also needs to tell Robert what she has done. She doesn't need his permission to do this, but he should know what she's up to. She sat back down at the desk, but she closed her laptop. She's ready for her meeting, so she had a couple of minutes to gather her thoughts. Should she arrange piano lessons for her two boys? Maybe. An idea flashed briefly through her mind that maybe she should take piano lessons. She didn't dwell on that. She quickly began to focus on the need to find a reputable piano mover, so she again opened her laptop, but this time she went to the browser and searched for piano movers in their area. She found several that had very high ratings on the internet. She made a note of one of those piano movers, and she would call them later in the day. Jed's address was in her address book, so there was no problem finding the location. When Kathy returned home in the afternoon, she arrived as the boys were arriving home from school. She went to the living room and looked at the layout of the living room to see just how this piano would fit. She concluded that it would fit fine and that only minor adjustments in the other furniture would be needed. She also saw that there was an electrical outlet on the wall next to this proposed location for the piano. She figured that would be useful because it is common to put a lamp on a piano. The lamp allows the piano player to see the music better. Most lamps on the top of pianos are also quite decorative. She doesn't have a lamp for this purpose yet, but she has a brass lamp in mind. She'll have to do some shopping. She'll go online and look at what's available. She glanced at her watch and saw that it was time to take Craig to his saxophone lesson. They needed to go to the music store where he would receive his saxophone lesson. While he is in his lesson, she and Bobby will go to the grocery store and pick up a few things. She has a little shopping list on the kitchen counter, and she knows what she needs. She called to the boys, and shortly Craig came down the stairs with his saxophone in its case. They all loaded into the car and drove to the music store. Once Craig was inside the music store, Kathy and Bobby went to the grocery store. They took their time in the store. There was no hurry. Occasionally, she would glance at her phone to gauge how much time there was left before it was time to pick Craig up at the store. She finished her purchases, and she and Bobby went out to the car. They drove to the music store and saw Craig waiting right outside the store. She had arrived just after he came out of the door. This is when she got her second surprise of the day. She saw Craig coming toward the car with his saxophone in its case, but he had something in his other hand. He had another case, and she was quite sure that this other case was nothing that he brought to the store. It was something he got at the store. Craig put his saxophone and this mysterious smaller case in the back of the car, and then he took his place in the back seat. Bobby was already in the passenger seat, so Craig just took his place in the back seat. As they drove home, Kathy asked Craig, "What was that smaller case? What's that all about?" Craig said, "Oh, it's a clarinet." Now Kathy was quite surprised, so she joked with Craig that perhaps he had purchased a clarinet for himself in the store. This was a joke because Craig is 12 years old and doesn't have the resources to buy himself a clarinet. At the age of 12 years, he would need his parents to make such a purchase. But her lighthearted question allowed Craig to explain why he came home with a clarinet. He explained that the clarinet was being loaned to him. He doesn't own the clarinet. It's owned by his teacher, but his teacher thought that he might find it fun and interesting to play it a little bit, to take it home and just play it. His teacher gave him this clarinet. It was a student model. It was plastic, but it was in good shape. And the teacher also provided a couple of reeds that he could use to play this clarinet. Really, this wasn't Craig's idea. It was just something offered to him, and he accepted the offer. This is very similar to what happened to Kathy earlier in the day. She was not planning on buying a piano or getting a piano, but it was offered to her, and she accepted the offer. In addition to the clarinet and the reed, Craig's teacher loaned him a method book. That is a paperback book with music and instructions so that Craig could explore this little clarinet and learn how it works. When they got home, Craig took his saxophone and his new clarinet up to his room. He practiced the tenor saxophone first, and Kathy could hear him going through his routine. He was practicing scales. He was doing long tones. That is, he was making a very even sound on a single note for a long time and listening to the quality of the sound he was making. He then played some etudes, that is, some exercises to help him develop better skills. He finished his practice session on the saxophone by playing some songs that he has been learning. He practiced for a little over 30 minutes. This all occurred upstairs, so Kathy could just hear the sound coming down the stairs and into the kitchen. It wasn't loud. She wasn't very close to his room, so she could just hear it in the distance. While Craig was practicing, Bobby was drawing, and Kathy was starting dinner. She was preparing dinner. After the sounds of the saxophone practice stopped, there was a brief pause. And then she heard some other sounds, less familiar sounds. Some of them sounded okay, but some of the sounds she heard coming down the stairs and into the kitchen were rather unpleasant. They were squeaky, squawky sounds. Over time, she heard more good sounds than the squeaking sounds that started out this session. Kathy realized that Craig was playing the new clarinet. He was trying to figure out how to get a sound out of that clarinet. Craig's practice on the clarinet continued for over an hour. When Robert got home, Kathy had plenty to tell him. She started out by explaining that they were getting a new piano. Robert quickly asked if she had bought a piano, and she explained that it was a gift. Robert thought that was very unusual. He was unfamiliar with somebody giving a piano away, but that's what she reported, so he believed her. "When does it arrive?" he asked. And she explained that next week the piano movers will pick it up and bring it, and then they have a piano tuner they work with, and the tuner will tune it in the living room so that it will be in good shape. Robert asked if it would fit in the living room and was quickly assured that it would be fine. When they had finished with the topic of the new piano, Robert asked Kathy if she thought that Craig's saxophone sounded a lot different than they were used to. Kathy explained what had occurred. Robert was very surprised that his son had been loaned a clarinet and was now playing it upstairs. He wasn't sure that he was in favor of that. He wasn't sure it was a good idea. After all, wouldn't it be better if Craig just stayed focused on the saxophone? Does it make any sense to be interested in the saxophone and the clarinet? Robert wondered out loud, that is, he asked the question out loud to Kathy, whether maybe this wasn't a good idea. Maybe this would be a distraction that would interfere with him developing skills playing the saxophone. Kathy said that she was worried about exactly the same thing. So she had called Craig's music teacher and asked what he was thinking. What was he up to giving this clarinet to Craig? She thanked him for what he had done, but she wanted to know what was his thought process. Why was he doing this? What was the reason that this occurred? Craig's saxophone teacher provided an excellent explanation. What he explained is that one could consider that the saxophone lessons are designed to create a saxophone player, or you could think of the purpose of these lessons in terms of creating a musician, and it is actually quite common for good musicians to play more than one instrument. Really good saxophone players frequently play clarinet or perhaps flute. Kathy had asked the teacher whether he was going to charge a rental fee for this clarinet, and she was told no, it was just being loaned. And if Craig wants to stick with the clarinet, then perhaps it would be wise to buy him a better clarinet if he's making a lot of progress on that. Kathy was very satisfied with that answer. It makes sense. The fact that this instrument is being loaned to Craig is ideal, because that way Craig can either be very interested in it or not so much. If over time he plays it a lot, then it can be concluded that he is very interested in it. No one is forcing Craig to play the clarinet. If, on the other hand, he never plays it, then it can be returned to its owner and no problem. She explained all of this to Robert, and he saw the wisdom in it. He realized that his concerns might have been a little narrow-minded, but of course this was the concern that he shared with Kathy. They were both concerned that this clarinet might represent a really bad idea. But the explanation of the thought process of the teacher allowed it to all make sense. Basically, we will see. Craig may play it a lot. He may never play it after this first day. And it doesn't matter because he will do what he wants to do, and they're just giving him opportunities to challenge himself, enjoy music, and learn new skills. Kathy reflected to Robert, "This is turning out to be a very unusual week." I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.